Alright guys, another day, another strength, and we got a nice little video for you today. That's right, a nice little video. This is going to be the first in a three-part series where I'm talking about my story, right? I'm going to give you a little background on me, tell you why I'm doing the things I'm doing, this and that, right? So I'm going to do it in three parts. I'm going to talk about my fitness journey, right? Strictly just the fitness part of it. My coaching journey, right? Getting into coaching, becoming a coach, so on and so forth. And then the finance part of it, right? Which sounds a little wacky, but I'll explain when I get to that video. That part is instrumental to the other parts, right? They all tie together, all very important. Core values for me, right? Fitness, finance, and education, if you will. So yeah, the fitness journey, let's start with that in this video. So growing up, played some sports, but I was never really athletic. I was never on like the good teams. I was always like, on the middling divisions, I would say. Like there were, like the town sports teams. I never played school sports. But for the town sports teams, there were like different kind of divisions based on how athletic you were. You do like a little tryout and they would kind of place you. And I was always like either in the middling one or like the one below that. So yeah, not that athletic, but I really enjoyed soccer particularly. That was like my main sport. I also played baseball. But I really enjoyed the feeling of exerting myself physically. I remember like I would love playing the games. I was very competitive. So I would enjoy that aspect of it. I enjoyed, seeing my teammates, playing around with them. I'm like probably between like 9 and 12 at this point. So just having a fun time, right? Running around, eating orange slices, that sort of thing. And then from ages about 14 to like 19 or 20, I was entirely sedentary and then began sprinkling and running at that point, as you do, right? You decide like, all right, I'm terribly out of shape and I would like to do something about it. So you just start running because that's just what you do, right? That's just kind of the culture. It's easy to do. You can just step outside and go ahead and do it. And I was, somewhat self-conscious. So I would go run in the woods where there weren't people around because I don't want people to like see me running. And also was like antisocial, didn't want to run into people. But yeah, my entire adult life, pretty much, I've been skinny fat. I didn't eat very much or very often. And then like when I did eat, I would just eat like something terribly unhealthy. Like I would eat, a half gallon of ice cream or something like that, or like get McDonald's or something like Papagenos. If you're a New Englander, you know what I'm talking about. Papagenos, shout out to them. But I got very into running around my mid-20s, and I started to kind of not even really take it seriously because I didn't actually. I'll tell you what I did in a second, but I would just kind of, I decided that I wanted to do more of my running. And I was more after aesthetic goals at the time, and I thought that that was going to get me there. And I later found out it's not going to get you there. But what I started doing is I basically would run a mile every single day. And then I might just do like more running after that, even if I felt like staying out longer. But I would try to just run the mile as fast as I could. So I was basically like novice linear progressioning my mile time, where I would just like run as hard as I could. And then I remember I started around like 7.5 or like high sevens, something like that. And it was like very uncomfortable. Like I was really running hard. And I probably weighed about like 135 to 140 at this time. That was my body weight. And so I wanted to, keep progressing that. So eventually I got my mile time to under 6 minutes. I ran like a 5:53. And at that point I was enjoying it less because it was really hard. Like I remember the 5:53 mile, basically from like 20 seconds in to the entire like end of it, I was just felt like my lungs were on fire and I couldn't breathe. And I was just, pushing myself as hard as I could basically, which was very miserable. But yeah, so I also realized at that time that running is probably not going to produce the aesthetic results that I wanted. So I began lifting. And same thing, I was self-conscious and anxious about going to the gym, right? So I lifted at home actually with a loadable dumbbell set, and I used a guitar case as a bench actually, so I could do bench press at the time. That was fun. But yeah, I started running strong lifts 5x5 using my dumbbells, mind you, right? So I'm doing squats by holding the dumbbells on my shoulders, right? Like one dumbbell on each shoulder, standing up. And I didn't log my training at that point, but I'm pretty sure I got up to, I remember like the number 95. It was either 95 on each dumbbell, which seems like a lot. I don't think I did that much, but it was probably like 95 total between the dumbbells, I would guess, something like that, right? But I would like set up the dumbbell. I actually had an actual bench at this point, and I would set the dumbbells on the actual bench and then kind of like scoot down into the bottom of the squat, get under it, put them on my shoulders. So the first rep was actually out of the bottom, like an Anderson squat or something like that. And then I basically just like did that until I was like, all right, I can't add any more weight to these dumbbells. I need to go to the gym. So this was like the actual birth of my lifting career at this point, I would say, around like August 2018. So I finally decided to get a gym membership at a local gym, began training with barbells. Great time, right? And then very, very soon after, I discovered starting strength in about early probably late 2018, early 2019, and realized that strong lifts, the one I've been doing, was basically like the ripoff of starting strength. But the problem is that I did not actually bother to delve deep into starting strength. I just kind of did like the online version of it, right? The internet version, doing like barbell rows and like not doing the program essentially, which everyone does, and then complains that it doesn't work. But you know, like even then, it still worked pretty well. It was not ideal, and I'll tell you in a second how when I actually did it for real, what happened. But even doing that in the subpar version of starting strength, by the summer of 2019, so this was like probably within like about 9 months of lifting, my body weight had increased to around 160. So from like 135, 140 up to 160. Got my squat to 3 sets of 5 at 200 and 225 for 1. I was pressing 3 sets of 5 at 110, benching 3x5 at 155, and deadlifting about 260 for 5. And speaking of the deadlift, around that time, that's when I first got injured doing a deadlift actually. And it's because my belt was too big and thick. It was really two things. It was like I didn't know how to deadlift that well, and then also I had like this big thick 4-inch belt that was like 10 millimeters that I was trying to wear while deadlifting, which is too big. But yeah, I tweaked my back and decided not to do any lower body for the next few months. Had my bro moment there, right? But it was really because I was just like, you know, it hurt and I didn't know what to do about it. And then not training lower body actually made the injury way worse, right? So it actually lasted for a few months, which was pretty dumb now, thinking back. And if I knew then what I know now, I probably would have been able to make it go away within like a couple weeks at the most, probably a few days. Because I've actually had like the same tweak within the last couple of years. And I've been able to make it go away within like 2 days generally. And then back to normal training after that. But yeah, so I returned it to running around this time. So I was actually just doing upper body in the gym, and then I was running outside the gym. And the running actually still bothered my back, but I did it because I was dumb. And I decided to run a half marathon in October of 2019, which turned out to be one of the worst physical experiences, rather, of my life. It was terrible. It was a very hilly trail in Upton, Massachusetts, and I remember everything aching so badly afterwards, like just everything hurt. I drove home. I napped for like 3 hours. I wasn't even hungry. Like I didn't even want to eat. I just like napped. Everything hurt. I woke up. It still hurt. It was awful, right? And I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'm done running now. And that's when I committed to as true starting strength NLP. And also like around that time, my back stuff had kind of like more or less resolved itself. So I got back on the LP, decided to actually intentionally gain some weight this time. Because the first time was just like, you know, if you started lifting heavy, you know, you just kind of start to gain weight naturally because you're putting on muscle, you get hungrier. So at this point, I intentionally gained some weight, and I ran the program without messing it all up, even though I still didn't do it 100% correct because I didn't have a coach or anything, but it was a lot better than the first time. And then this time, I went from 160 to 180, so my body weight was 180. My squat went from 3x5 at 200 to 3x5 at 265, and I also squatted 300 for 1. And this, by the way, was over the course of a couple months. So October is when I started it, and then I finished it like literally like right after Christmas, around New Year's. I have the training log still. I looked at it. So yeah, the squat 265, 3 sets of 5, and then 300 for 1. Got my press up to 3x5 at 120, and I pressed 135, 1 plate for 1. I was excited about that. Still the video actually. I like fell over right after because I was, I attempted it one time and it got way in front of me and I didn't know what that was at the time. So I was like, well, I'll just try it again. And then I tried it again, and like, not intentionally, the bar just happened to be in the right bar path. And so it just like flew up super fast and scared the heck out of me. I probably could have done like 135 for 5 at the time if I knew how to actually press. And then like it scared the crap out of me and I almost fell over. But yeah, then I benched 3 sets of 5 at 175 and 200 for 1. And I deadlifted 1 set of 5 at 290 and 300 for 1 because my form was so awful. I actually tried 315 and then I like couldn't even budge off the floor, which what actually happened was my hips were way too low because I was set up wrong. And then when I started pushing, the bar would roll back to midfoot because it's in front of midfoot, and my hips would rise. And then like right as it was in the right spot, I would stop pushing because I thought I had pushed for long enough when I hadn't, and I would just like give up. So yeah, I could have deadlifted more at the time. But those were my numbers. That was my body weight. So then after this, there was the global events craze, right? And as any true lifter does, I actually started to dabble in more starting strength stuff. Non-starting strength stuff, right? So I ran the starting strength LP. It got hard. I actually remember I tried Texas Method. I'm like, that's what you're supposed to do. So I tried that. I was like, this is way too hard. I'm not doing this. And then I started doing like random powerlifting stuff that like, was suboptimal at the time. It still worked. I still got stronger, but it wasn't, the best use of my time, as I found out later on. But yeah, due to partially luck and partial tenacity and obsession with lifting, I was able to scour the internet and Facebook Marketplace. I remember I was working from home during COVID, as everyone was, and in between every single, I'm not gonna spoil what I was doing at the time, but in between my clients, I would go on Facebook Marketplace every single free second I got and just refresh and try to find fitness equipment so that I could scrap together a home gym. And within probably 2 weeks, I had a full home gym and was able to train just fine. So my training was largely interrupted by that. But yeah, over the next year, I would squat 315 for one, bench 225 for one, and deadlift 315 for five. And I think I gained another 10 pounds. So I was 190 or something like that. But yeah, so I had improved upon those numbers within that year. Probably could have done a lot more if I knew what I was doing, but that was fine at the time. And then around Memorial Day of 2021, I began apprenticing at Starting Strength Boston and receiving guidance from the coaches that were there at the time. So I ran another linear progression with actual coaching and guidance. And I had some semi-intelligent intermediate programming after that as well. Whereas before I had just done the LP and then tried Texas Method, failed, and then just gone to something else. So by the end of that LP, the end of 2021, I weighed 200 pounds for the first time, and I was squatting 355 for one. I remember I squatted 315 for five. I benched 240 for one. I was not benching 225 for five yet at the time. I was pressing 170 for one and deadlifting 420 for one. So my numbers had improved quite a bit from the previous LP. And then in 2022, I earned my SSC. I ran a cut, as one does, right? And I began experimenting with kind of exercise variation and seeing what happened when I cut. And then, I use different progression models, all that sort of stuff, right? Trying to try all this stuff out that Rip says not to do because it doesn't work. And then you have to try it for yourself to know exactly what's going on, right? So I tried all that, and sure enough, he was right. It all didn't work. But I always wanted to try that stuff out. I don't regret doing it because I still I took data. I know I have all kinds of data now on gaining body weight, losing body weight, different styles of training, all this different stuff, right? 2023, I decided to gain some weight again, focus on upper body this time because I felt like it was way behind my lower body. So I pressed 200 in August of 2023, weighing 196. So that was just over body weight press and 200 for the first time, which was pretty exciting. And then I kind of just started dirty bulking after that and bulked beyond 200 up to 213. And that's when it started to not go well. So now I have data knowing that going beyond 200, which quote unquote beyond 200, which actually in terms of body fat percentage, I took a DEXA, now I know how much that was, but I basically went from 30% body fat to 35%, that's where the diminishing returns kicked in essentially, is so basically all the way up to 30% body fat, I tend to have a productive increase in strength, let's say. And then beyond 30% is when I'm just kind of putting on mostly fat and not really getting much done. But yeah, at that time, my lifts were, I pressed 185 for five. I benched 247.5 for five. I did 250 for four, and then the last rep, the plate started to slide off the bar, so I did not quite get that, which was sad. And then I benched 270 for one, and then I also squatted 345 for five and 370 for one, and I deadlifted 375 for five. So that was around between September and December of last year, which is when I was at peak bulk. And then I started to come on back down, which I'm doing right now still, as you guys know if you're watching the videos. But yeah, now here I am. I'm nearing the end of this is my longest and most dramatic cut yet. I've never cut more than 20 pounds before. And so I'm already down 30, and I have another 10 or 15 to go, depending on what happens, right? But the goal weight's around 170, which is about 35 pounds heavier than when I started lifting, which would be around, according to if the DEXA was correct and the actual calculation of body fat percentage of that weight, I'd be around 20% body fat, just under at 170. So that would mean if I could do that, I was probably around 20% body fat when I started, because I've never had visible abs in my life. I was always skinny fat, like I said, and I definitely look a lot better now. Even when I was pretty huge, I still looked better than I did when I was skinny. I would say at least. But I think I probably have gained 30-ish pounds of lean mass in those 6 years of lifting. But yeah, again, this year also I have started trying some quote-unquote bodybuilding style training, incorporating more accessories and more smaller single joint stuff, messing around at the gym with that, which has been a lot of fun. And some of it is actually kind of working well, so I'll definitely document all that when I finish up the cut, talk about the program that I've done throughout it. But yeah, the next couple of years, my lifting goals are to squat 405, bench 315, and press 225, weighing under 200, which I think is totally doable. And then my long-term goals are to squat 500, bench 405, and press 300, which people always like roll their eyes and they're like, on the internet at least, they're like, oh, that's so crazy, those are lofty goals. But like, if I've squatted 370 and I have to get to 500, right? Especially if I can squat 370 at 170, which I will be able to, and then I will be able to run that back up, right? Let's say I just gain another 30 pounds slowly. Like my squat's gonna wind up probably somewhere in like the low 400s, maybe mid 400s, in 10 years. That's the timeline. It's like long term, right? So people are always like, they just say, I can't do that, right? They just go straight to that. But think of the time horizon, think of the effort that you're gonna put in the work, and you can totally get to some serious goals. But yeah, 405 bench, I don't think that one's gonna be, like obviously it's gonna be hard, it's gonna take a long time, but I don't think it's like a crazy goal. The 300 press, that's gonna be the tough one, right? But I think I can do it, especially if I can bench 405, because right now, like my press is just over 200 and my bench PR is 270 for one, right? So they're within like 60 or 70 pounds. If you do the percentages, if I can bench 405, I can probably press like 315 plus. But yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and do the coaching one next. So you guys will see that when it goes up. And I'll see you guys in that video. All right, goodbye.